My whole life was a lie. Not a blatant, screaming lie, but a subtle, insidious one woven into the very fabric of my existence. I was Mina Collins, only child of Robert and Elizabeth Collins. Collins Industries, Collins, money, power, prestige. I had it all, or so everyone thought. Dad, with his iron will and empire built from the ground up, always pushed me, molded me, into what he thought I should be. Mom, a shimmering socialite, taught me how to navigate high society, how to smile. Even when my soul felt like it was being scraped raw, our mansion, a fortress of marble and manicured lawns, felt more like a prison than a home. I had everything a girl could supposedly want. Fancy schools, designer clothes, vacations in exotic places. But beneath the surface, a hollowness gnawed at me, a feeling of being fundamentally, intrinsically empty, like a beautiful vase worth a fortune but containing nothing. Then came Mark. Mark Johnson. The name still tastes like ash in my mouth. I met him senior year of college. Lightning. That's the only word for it. A jolt of pure, raw energy that ripped through the carefully constructed walls around my heart. He was charming, undeniably handsome, but it was more than that. He saw me, the real me, buried beneath layers of expectation and privilege. He got me. We fell hard and fast. For the first time in my life, I felt alive, truly, deeply alive, like I was finally breathing air that wasn't stale and recycled. The only problem? My parents despised him. "Mina, darling," Mom said one evening, her voice dripping with honeyed disapproval, "don't you think Mark is attracted to you? Well, not just by your inner qualities, but also by our circumstances." Dad's face was a thundercloud. "He's got no ambition, Mina. No prospects. He's not the kind of man who can give you the life you're accustomed to." His words weren't a suggestion, but a command. "I don't care about any of that," I screamed, pushing back from the mahogany table. "I love him. He loves me." "Isn't that enough?" My voice cracked, desperation clawing at my throat. It was never enough for them. Never. The inevitable showdown happened when Mark proposed. No fancy restaurant, no orchestrated proposal. Just us, walking in the park where we'd had our first date. He knelt, pulled out a simple silver ring, and asked me to be his wife. "Yes," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Yes, yes, yes." Telling my parents was like throwing a grenade into a china shop. "If you marry him," Dad roared, his face purple with rage, "you're no longer welcome in this house. Daddy, please." I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Can't you just be happy for me?" He wouldn't budge. Mom stood silently by his side, her face a mask of cold disappointment. The same disappointment I had been feeling for years, aimed squarely at me. That night, I left. Heartbreak ripped through me, but I was resolute. I packed a small bag, grabbed what little money I had saved, and moved into Mark's tiny, cramped apartment. It was a world away from the sterile luxury I was used to, but I didn't care. I was with Mark. That's all that mattered. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur. Planning, budgeting, stressing. I clung to the hope that my parents would come around, that they'd realize how much their presence meant to me. But as the day approached, that hope dwindled. Walking down the aisle, I scanned the faces in the pews, desperately searching for them. But they weren't there. A wave of sadness threatened to drown me, to suffocate the fragile happiness I'd managed to build. Then I saw Mark, standing at the altar, his eyes locked on mine, filled with such adoration that it took my breath away. In that moment, everything else faded. My parents' absence, the modest surroundings, the uncertain future, none of it mattered. I was marrying the man I loved. That had to be enough. After the wedding, we moved into the apartment my grandfather had left me, a luxury high-rise in the heart of the city. It was a strange, bittersweet victory, a lifeline from the past, a reminder of a love that didn't demand I become someone else, The place was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city skyline. I threw myself into decorating, trying to make it feel like our home. Weeks turned into months, and we settled into a routine. Mark worked tirelessly at his marketing firm, often coming home late, but always with a smile and a kiss. I volunteered at the local animal shelter, finding solace in the unconditional love of forgotten creatures. Life felt good. Then, a year and a half later, everything changed. I still remember the day I found out I was pregnant. My hands shook as I held the positive test. A tidal wave of emotions washed over me. Joy, terror, disbelief. When I told Mark, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, picking me up and spinning me around. "Mina, this is amazing, Jacob. Our son." He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a shock of dark hair, just like his father's. Exhaustion blurred into joy. I snapped a picture and sent it to my parents. "Silence. They'll come around," Mark assured me, seeing the hurt in my eyes. How could they resist this little guy? I tried to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe him. A few months later, I decided to go back to work part-time. Balancing work, a newborn, and a house was a constant struggle, but I was determined. I'd wake up early to feed Jacob, drop him off at daycare, work my shift, pick him up, make dinner, clean, then collapse into bed only to do it all over again. Then things started to change. Slowly, subtly at first. Jacob neared his first birthday, and I noticed Mark becoming more distant. He came home later, always glued to his phone. When he was home, he seemed distracted, lost in his own world. "Everything okay at work?" I asked one night as we got ready for bed. "Yeah, just busy," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Big project coming up." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I pushed it aside. We were happy, weren't we? Beautiful sun, lovely home, good jobs. What more could I want? The changes became more pronounced. One evening, as I was putting Jacob to bed, Mark cornered me in the nursery. "Mina, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "I think you should quit your job." I blinked, sure I'd misheard him. "Quit my job? Why?" He gestured vaguely around the room. "Look around. The house is a mess. Jacob needs more attention. I think it would be better if you focused on being a full-time mom and housewife." I felt like I'd been slapped. "But I love my job, and I thought we were managing just fine." His face hardened. "Well, we're not. I'm the man of this house, and I'm telling you, it's time to quit." We argued late into the night, but in the end, I caved. I told myself it was for the good of our family, that Mark was just stressed from work. The next day, with a heavy heart, I handed in my resignation. At first, I threw myself into my new role. Deep cleaned the apartment, tried new recipes, spent hours playing with Jacob. But as the days wore on, I found myself missing the structure and satisfaction of my work. Meanwhile, Mark's behavior continued to deteriorate. He started coming home later and later, often smelling of alcohol. Our bank account, which I still had access to, showed mysterious withdrawals. One night, as I was folding laundry, I confronted him. "Mark, where is all our money going? We're barely making ends meet," he exploded. "Maybe if you knew how to budget properly, we wouldn't have this problem." I recoiled, shocked. This wasn't the man I married. Things spiraled from there. He began criticizing everything. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner was never good enough. I wasn't attentive enough to Jacob. The final straw came when Jacob got sick with a nasty flu. He was running a high fever, crying constantly. I was at my wit's end, having been up for 2 nights straight. "Mark, please," I begged. "Can you take a day off to help me with Jacob? I'm exhausted." He looked at me like I was crazy. "Take a day off? Are you kidding? Some of us actually have to work for a living, Mina." The next day, he came home with a suitcase. "I'm going to a hotel for a few days," he announced. "I need to rest after work, not listen to a screaming kid." I was stunned. You're leaving us? Now? He shrugged, already heading for the door. Taking care of Jacob is your job, not mine. Call me when he's better. The door slammed shut behind him. I sank to the floor, Jacob wailing in my arms. What had happened to us? To the man who had once looked at me like I hung the moon? In that moment, I missed my parents more than ever. I wanted to call them, to hear my mother's soothing voice, to feel my father's protective embrace. But pride and shame held me back. How could I admit that they had been right all along? As I rocked Jacob, trying to soothe both his cries and my own, I couldn't help but think about the words my father had said on the day. I told them about my engagement. He's not the man you think he is, Mina. The days following Mark's departure to the hotel were a blur of sleepless nights and exhausting days. Jacob's fever finally broke, and as his health improved, I found myself with more time to think, perhaps too much time. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. The man who returned from the hotel was not the Mark one had fallen in love with. He was distant, irritable, and seemed to resent both Jacob and me. The kindness and affection was gone, replaced with a cold disdain that chilled me to the bone. One evening, about a week after he'd returned, Mark came home earlier than usual. His face was serious and he was clutching some papers. Mina, we need to talk about insurance, he said, sitting down at the kitchen table. I've taken out a life insurance policy on myself for $1 million. I think you should do the same. The amount made my head spin. $1 million? Mark, that seems excessive. And why do I need such a large policy? I don't even work outside the home anymore. His eyes hardened. It's for Jacob's future, in case anything happens to either of us. Don't you want to make sure he's taken care of? Put that way, I couldn't argue. I suppose you're right, I said slowly. If you think it's best. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. I'll set up the appointment with the insurance agent. Over the next few days, Mark's behavior became even stranger. He was constantly on his phone, texting at all hours. Whenever it rang, he'd leave the room to answer, often locking himself in our home office. He would smile and laugh softly, as if sharing a private joke with someone only he could hear. One morning, after Mark left for work, I made a decision. I couldn't live with this uncertainty anymore. I needed answers. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found online. Hawkeye Private Investigations. How can I help you? A gruff voice answered. I took a deep breath. I need someone to follow my husband. I think he might be. I couldn't bring myself to say the words. But the investigator seemed to understand. I see MAAM. Why don't you come into our office, and we can discuss the details? That afternoon, while Jacob was napping, I met with Linda, the investigator. A no-nonsense woman with eyes that seemed to see right through you. I told her everything. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the drastic personality change. Linda listened intently, taking notes. We'll get to the bottom of this, Miss S. Johnson. I'll have my best guy on it. As I left her office, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Part of me hoped this was all a misunderstanding, that there was a reasonable explanation for Mark's behavior, but a larger part knew that whatever the investigator uncovered was likely to change my life forever. 3 weeks after hiring the private investigator, I received the call I had been both dreading and anticipating. Miss S. Johnson, we have the report ready. Linda's voice came through the phone. You might want to sit down for this. With trembling hands, I sank into a chair, my heart pounding. I'm ready. Tell me everything. As Linda spoke, I felt my world crumbling around me. Mark, my husband, the father of my child, had been unfaithful. He had a mistress. The evidence was irrefutable. Photographs, text messages, hotel receipts. It was all there in black and white. The color was gone from my world, and I was left with a stark, bleak landscape of despair and betrayal. I waited until Mark left for work the next morning before springing into action. With shaking hands, I packed a bag for myself and Jacob, throwing in only the essentials, clothes, diapers, a few of Jacob's favorite toys. I couldn't bear to look at the photos on the walls, the happy memories that now felt like lies. Each memory was a shard of glass, cutting into my soul. "We're going to see Grandma and Grandpa," I cooed to Jacob as I put him in the stroller. He giggled, oblivious to the turmoil around him. I decided to take the metro to my parents' house. It would be faster than driving through rush hour traffic. As I approached the station, my mind was racing, planning our next steps. That's when it happened. I was crossing the street, pushing Jacob in his stroller, when suddenly there was a screech of tires. I turned my head and saw a car hurtling towards us. In a split second, I reacted. I pushed the stroller out of the way. Then pain. Blinding, all-consuming pain. And then darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I finally opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room. The steady beep of machines filled the air, a constant, monotonous reminder that I was still alive. And there, sitting by my bed, looking haggard and worried, was Mark. "Jacob," I croaked, my throat dry. "Where's Jacob?" Mark leaned forward, taking my hand. "He's fine, Mina. He's with Lisa." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a wave of agony. I looked down at my legs, both encased in casts. "You have multiple fractures in both legs," Mark explained gently. "The doctors say it'll take about a year for you to fully recover. You'll need to use a wheelchair for a while, a year." A wheelchair. The word echoed in my mind, amplifying the pain and fear. Then, like a bolt of lightning, I remembered why I had been at that metro station in the first place. "I know about her," I blurted out, my eyes snapping open to gauge Mark's reaction. "Your mistress." "I know everything." Mark's face paled. For a moment, he looked like he might deny it. Then, his shoulders slumped. "Mina, It wasn't serious. It was a stupid mistake," he stammered. "When I got the call about your accident, I realized how close I came to losing you." "I can't lose you, Mina. Please, can we start over? Give me another chance." "I'll do better, I promise." I looked at him. This man I had loved for so long. He seemed so sincere, so remorseful. And I was so tired, so overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Okay," I heard myself say. "We can try." The day I was discharged from the hospital was surreal. Mark arrived with a bouquet of my favorite flowers, pink peonies. His smile seemed genuine, his eyes filled with concern and love. As he wheeled me out of the hospital, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could make this work after all. The first 2 weeks at home were surprisingly nice. Mark was attentive, caring, almost doting. He helped me with everything, from getting dressed to bathing. He'd carry me to the bathroom in his arms, careful not to jar my injured legs. It reminded me of our early days together, when every touch felt electric. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Mark turned to me with a glint in his eye. "Mina, I've been thinking," he said, taking my hand. "We should get away for a weekend. Just the two of us. To celebrate your recovery and us." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? Where?" "I found this cozy little house in the mountains, overlooking a beautiful canyon." "What do you say?" I couldn't help but smile. "That sounds wonderful. But what about Jacob? And I'm in a wheelchair. Lisa wouldn't mind watching him for a couple of days. As for the wheelchair, I'll carry you in my arms if I have to. Come on, it'll be good for us." I agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This could be exactly what we needed to reconnect, to rebuild. The drive to the mountains was peaceful. As we wound our way up the narrow, winding road, I felt the tension of the past months slowly melting away. The house, when we arrived, was everything Mark had promised. Cozy, secluded, with breathtaking views of the canyon. The air was crisp and clean, and the silence was deafening. "I'm going to explore a bit," Mark said after we'd settled in. "Why don't you rest?" I nodded, watching him disappear down a trail. Left alone, I decided to check my emails. I hadn't had a chance to do so since the accident. My phone was missing, presumably shattered in the accident. I wheeled myself over to Mark's laptop, which he left on the coffee table. As I opened the browser, an email notification popped up. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line made my blood run cold. Urgent. New information about your case. With trembling hands, I clicked on it. The message was from Linda, the private investigator I'd hired weeks ago. My heart pounded as I read, Miss S. Johnson, I've been trying to reach you. I've uncovered disturbing new information. You're in danger. Your husband was involved in your accident. He's trying to get rid of you for the insurance money. His mistress was driving the car that hit you. I've attached evidence, photos, videos, texts. Please contact me immediately. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. There was Mark, plotting with his mistress. There were bank statements showing large withdrawals. There was a grainy video of a woman who looked remarkably like Mark's assistant behind the wheel of a car, moments before impact. The pieces fell into place, and the picture that formed was one of calculated malice and betrayal. Just as I closed the laptop, Mark walked in. I tried to compose myself, but my heart was racing. Everything okay, Mina? He asked, his voice deceptively casual. I forced a smile. Yeah, I can't find my phone. Have you seen it? A cold smile played on Mark's lips. Oh, that broke, suddenly. Must have been damaged in the accident. A chill ran down my spine. I needed to contact someone, anyone. But how? Mark, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Could I borrow your phone? I want to check on Jacob, see how he's doing with Lisa. He hesitated for a moment, then handed me his phone. Sure, go ahead. I'll just be right here. My hands trembled as I took the phone. Mark lingered nearby, watching. I knew I couldn't call the police, or even Lisa. He was so close. Then, a memory flashed in my mind. A conversation with my father years ago. If you're ever in trouble and can't speak freely, ask about Buddy the bear. I'll know you need help. Praying my father hadn't changed his number, I dialed. When he answered, I put on my brightest voice. Hey, Lisa! How's everything going? How's Buddy the bear doing? There was a pause. I held my breath. Then my father's voice came through, deliberately high-pitched to sound feminine. Oh, same old, same old. How are you? Relief washed over me. He understood. Good! Oh, it's lovely up here, I gushed, aware of Mark's eyes on me. We're at this beautiful cabin at 1247 Pine Ridge Road. The view of Evergreen Canyon is just stunning. I see, my father said carefully. When do you think you'll be back? Oh, I dream of seeing you right now, this very second, I said emphatically. I miss you guys already. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, I hung up. Mark seemed satisfied, not suspecting anything. As evening approached, Mark suggested a walk. The sunset over the canyon is beautiful. We shouldn't miss it. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had no choice. If I refused, it would confirm his suspicions. That sounds nice, I managed to say. Mark wheeled me out onto a narrow path that wound along the edge of the canyon. The view was breathtaking. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. The canyon stretched endlessly before us, a seemingly bottomless abyss. But all I could think about was the sheer drop, just feet away. As Mark pushed my wheelchair, chatting about the scenery as if everything was normal, I closed my eyes and prayed. Please, Dad, I thought desperately. Please find me in time. The path curved one last time, and suddenly we were at the edge of the cliff. Mark turned my chair around and our eyes met. The loving facade he'd maintained crumbled away, revealing a stranger with eyes full of anger and hatred. You know, Mina, he said, his voice cold and detached. I'm really sorry it had to come to this. The car accident was supposed to take care of everything, but you just had to survive, didn't you? My blood ran cold as the full truth of my situation hit me. "Mark, please," I whispered. "Don't do this." He laughed, a mirthless, chilling sound. "Do you have any idea how perfect this is? A tragic accident at a scenic overlook. Your wheelchair rolls off the edge when the brakes fail. I'll be the grieving widower, inherit your apartment, and cash in that $1 million insurance policy. It's foolproof." As he spoke, he inched my wheelchair closer to the edge. My stomach dropped, and I fought back the urge to scream. I closed my eyes, silently praying for a miracle. Suddenly, I heard shouts and running footsteps. My eyes flew open to see my father sprinting down the path, followed closely by several police officers. "Mina!" my father yelled, reaching us just as Mark was about to push me over. He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, yanking me back from the brink. Everything happened in a blur after that. The police tackled Mark to the ground, reading him his rights as they handcuffed him. I sat there shaking, as the reality of what had almost happened washed over me. My father knelt beside my wheelchair, pulling me into a tight embrace. I broke down, sobbing into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I choked out between sobs. "You were right about him. I should have listened to you." He stroked my hair gently, his own voice thick with emotion. "No, sweetheart, I'm the one who should be sorry. We let our pride keep us apart. Can you forgive us for not being there for you and Jacob?" I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. We stayed like that for a long moment, years of hurt and misunderstanding melting away in the face of shared fear and relief. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. I filed for divorce. With the overwhelming evidence against him, Mark was sentenced to prison for attempted murder, along with his mistress, who had driven the car in the original accident. I sold the apartment that held so many painful memories and bought a new one, close to a good school for Jacob and just a few blocks from my parents' house. I moved back in with my parents during my rehabilitation. It was a year of healing, both physically and emotionally. My parents doted on Jacob, making up for lost time with their grandson. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to smile again, to hope again. The physical therapy was brutal. Every stretch, every movement sent searing pain through my legs. There were days I wanted to give up, to resign myself to a life confined to a wheelchair. But then I'd look at Jacob, his bright eyes full of innocent joy, and I'd find the strength to push on. He deserved a mother who was strong, both inside and out. My parents were my rocks. Mom, who had once seemed so distant, now spent hours by my side reading to me, painting my nails, just being there. Dad, the stoic businessman, transformed into a playful grandfather, building elaborate Lego castles with Jacob and taking him to the park every afternoon. They were making up for lost time, not just with Jacob, but with me. One afternoon, as I sat in my wheelchair watching Jacob play with his grandfather, Mom sat down beside me. "Mina," she said softly, taking my hand, "I know we made mistakes. Big ones, but we love you. And we're so proud of the woman you've become." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I love you both too," I whispered. "Thank you for everything." The healing process wasn't just physical. The emotional scars ran deep. I had nightmares, reliving the accident, the moment I saw the car hurtling towards us, the look of hatred in Mark's eyes as he tried to push me over the cliff. I started seeing a therapist. "Doctor!" Anya Sharma was patient and compassionate, helping me to unpack the years of trauma and betrayal. Slowly, I began to understand that I wasn't to blame for what had happened. Mark's actions were a reflection of his own darkness, not a judgment on my worth. "You are a survivor, Mina, Doctor," Sharma said one day. "You have incredible strength. Don't let what happened to you define who you are." Her words resonated with me. I was a survivor. I had faced unimaginable pain and come out the other side. I wouldn't let Mark steal my life from me. As my physical strength returned, so did my confidence. I started exploring my passions again. I enrolled in an art class, Rediscovering the joy of painting. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping other survivors of domestic violence. I found purpose in using my experience to empower others. One evening, as I was working on a painting, Dad came into the room. "That's beautiful, Mina," he said, admiring the vibrant colors on the canvas. "You know, your grandfather would have been so proud of you." My grandfather had been an artist himself, a free spirit who had always encouraged me to pursue my creative passions. He was the only one who understood the yearning that had always lived inside me. "I miss him," I said softly. "He's still with you, Mina," Dad said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "In your heart, in your talent. Don't ever forget that," I smiled. "I won't." A year after the accident, I took my first steps without assistance. It was a slow, unsteady process, but I did it. I walked across the room, from my wheelchair to my father's outstretched arms. Tears streamed down both our faces. "You did it, Mina," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." That day marked a turning point. I was no longer defined by my injuries, but by my strength, my resilience, my determination. I returned to work, not as a manager at a boutique, but as a volunteer coordinator at the women's shelter. I found fulfillment in helping other women rebuild their lives, in giving them the support and resources they needed to escape abusive relationships. Jacob was thriving. He was a happy, well-adjusted little boy, surrounded by love and support. He knew that his father was in prison, but he didn't understand the full extent of what had happened. We focused on creating positive memories, on filling his life with joy and laughter. One sunny afternoon, as we were playing in the park, Jacob turned to me and said, "Mommy, are you happy?" I looked at him, at his innocent face, and my heart swelled with love. "Yes, Jacob," I said, smiling. "I am. I'm happy to be your mommy, and I'm happy to be alive." The scars remained, both physical and emotional, but they were a reminder of how far I had come, of the strength I had found within myself. I was no longer the empty vase, the fragile socialite. I was a warrior, a survivor, a mother, an artist, a woman who had found her voice and was finally ready to use it. One evening, as I was putting Jacob to bed, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hesitantly, I answered. "Hello, Mina?" a male voice said. "It's Daniel." My heart skipped a beat. Daniel. I hadn't heard from him in years. He was a friend from college, someone I had always admired. He was kind, intelligent, and had a heart of gold. "Daniel!" "Wow, this is unexpected. How did you get my number?" He chuckled. "A mutual friend? I heard about what happened. I wanted to reach out to see if you were okay." We talked for hours that night. We reminisced about old times. We shared our hopes and dreams for the future. He told me about his work as a doctor in a rural community, about his passion for helping others. As we talked, I felt a spark ignite within me, a spark of hope, of connection, of possibility. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and I talked frequently. We discovered that we had a lot in common, not just our shared history, but our values, our beliefs, our desire to make a difference in the world. He eventually came to visit. He spent the weekend with Jacob and me, playing games, reading stories, and exploring the city. He was wonderful with Jacob, patient and kind. As I watched them together, I felt a sense of peace and contentment I hadn't felt in a long time. On Sunday evening, as he was preparing to leave, Daniel turned to me and said, "Mina, I know it's soon, but I have to tell you, I've always had feelings for you, even back in college. And seeing you now, seeing how strong and resilient you are, I can't deny it any longer. I'm falling in love with you." Tears streamed down my face. "Daniel," I whispered, I don't know what to say. Just say you'll consider it," he said, taking my hand. "Just say you'll give us a chance." I looked into his eyes, into his kind, honest face, and I knew that I couldn't deny my feelings any longer. "Yes, Daniel," I said, smiling. "I'll give us a chance. Life isn't a fairy tale. There are no guarantees, no happily ever afters. But I had learned that even after the darkest of nights, the sun will eventually rise. I had faced the cliff's edge and I had chosen to step back. I had survived. Daniel moved to the city a few months later. He found a job at a local hospital, and we started building a life together. He became a loving partner to me and a wonderful father figure to Jacob. One sunny afternoon, we drove back to the mountains, to the canyon that had almost been my grave. I was nervous, hesitant to revisit the scene of so much pain. As we stood at the edge of the cliff, hand in hand, I looked out at the breathtaking view. The same view that had once filled me with dread now filled me with a sense of awe and gratitude. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "It is," Daniel said, putting his arm around me. "But you know what's even more beautiful? You? Your strength, your spirit, your ability to love again. You're the most amazing woman I know." I smiled. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." We stayed there for a long time, just holding each other, watching the sun set over the canyon. The cliff's edge was no longer a symbol of fear and death, but a reminder of how far I had come, of the strength I had found within myself, of the new life I had built. I had survived the fall. I had climbed back up, and I was finally ready to fly. The years that followed were filled with love, laughter, and healing. Daniel and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. My parents walked me down the aisle, their eyes filled with pride and love. It was the wedding I had always dreamed of, the wedding I deserved. Jacob became Daniel's son in every way that mattered. They had a bond that was unbreakable, a connection built on love and respect. Daniel taught Jacob how to play baseball, how to ride a bike, how to be a good man. I continued my work at the women's shelter, becoming an advocate for survivors of domestic violence. I shared my story with anyone who would listen, hoping to inspire others to break free from abusive relationships. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference on domestic violence. I was nervous, terrified to stand in front of so many people and share my story, but I knew I had to do it. I had a voice, and it was time to use it. As I stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told them about my childhood, about my marriage to Mark, about the betrayal, the accident, the attempted murder. I told them about the pain, the fear, the despair, and then I told them about the hope, about the healing, the strength, the resilience. I told them about the love I had found, the new life I had built. When I finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering, crying. I saw tears streaming down faces filled with hope and inspiration. After the speech, dozens of women came up to me, sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving them the courage to speak out. In that moment, I knew that I had found my purpose. I was no longer just a survivor, but a warrior, a healer, a voice for the voiceless. Years passed. Jacob grew into a kind, intelligent, and compassionate young man. He was accepted into a prestigious college, fulfilling his dreams of becoming a doctor. Daniel and I couldn't have been prouder. One day, I received a letter. It was from Mark. He was writing from prison. He was nearing the end of his sentence, and he wanted to apologize. He wanted to ask for my forgiveness. My first instinct was to throw the letter away, to erase him from my life completely. But then I thought about Dr. Sharma's words. Forgiveness is not about condoning what happened, but about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. I decided to visit him. The prison was a bleak, sterile place, a concrete box filled with despair. I sat in a small, windowless room, waiting for Mark to arrive. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He was gaunt. His hair was graying, and his eyes were filled with remorse. He sat down across from me, his hands trembling. "Mina," he said softly, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for everything. I ruined your life. I almost killed you. I deserve to be here. Tears streamed down my face. Why, Mark? I asked. Why did you do it? He looked down at his hands, his voice barely a whisper. I was weak. I was greedy. I wanted the money, the power. I thought it would make me happy. But it didn't. It only made me miserable. And I destroyed everything in the process. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain. Can you ever forgive me, Mina? I looked at him, at the broken, remorseful man sitting before me. I thought about the pain he had caused, the years of suffering he had inflicted. And then I thought about the strength I had found, the life I had built. I forgive you, Mark, I said softly. Not for your sake, but for mine. I need to let go of the anger, the resentment. I need to move on. A look of relief washed over his face. Thank you, Mina, he said. Thank you. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past hanging heavy in the air. Then I stood up. Goodbye, Mark, I said. I hope you find peace. I walked out of the prison, leaving him behind. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had forgiven him, and in doing so, I had freed myself. Years turned into decades. Daniel and I grew old together, our love deepening with each passing day. Jacob became a successful doctor, dedicating his life to helping others. My parents passed away peacefully in their sleep, surrounded by their loved ones. They knew that I was happy, that I was strong, that I was loved. I continued my work at the women's shelter, inspiring countless women to break free from abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. One day, I received a phone call from Hawkeye Private Investigations. Linda, the investigator who had helped me uncover Mark's betrayal, was retiring. She wanted to thank me for trusting her, for giving her the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. We met for coffee, reminiscing about the past. She told me that my case had changed her, that it had made her more compassionate, more determined to fight for justice. You're an inspiration, Mina, she said. You turned tragedy into triumph. You gave hope to so many people. I smiled. Thank you, Linda. You helped me save my own life. As I walked away from the coffee shop, I looked up at the sky. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the world was filled with endless possibilities. I had faced the cliff's edge, and I had survived. I had found my voice, my purpose, my love, and I knew that no matter what challenges life might throw my way, I would be ready to face them. The future was bright, and I was finally ready to embrace it. The fear was gone, and I was ready to live my life and tell my story to as many people as possible so I could help others. Years blur into a tapestry woven with threads of joy, sorrow, resilience, and love. My hair is now silver, mirroring the silver ring Mark gave me so long ago, a cruel reminder transformed into a symbol of my strength. My hands, once trembling with fear, are now steady, used to create art, to comfort, to hold the hands of others in need. Jacob, my son, is a brilliant doctor, just as he dreamed. He married a wonderful woman, Sarah, and they have 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, Lily and Ethan. Seeing them fills my heart with a joy that transcends words. They are my legacy, my future. Daniel, my beloved husband, is still by my side. His love is a constant beacon, guiding me through the storms of life. We hold hands every night, sharing our dreams and our fears, knowing that we are each other's anchor in the turbulent sea of existence. I still work at the women's shelter, though now as a mentor and advisor. My younger colleagues, women who have come through the program and found their own strength, now lead the day-to-day operations. I guide them, offering wisdom gleaned from my own experiences, ensuring that the light continues to shine for generations to come. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Daniel, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant colors, I thought about my life. The pain, the loss, the betrayal, it was all still there, etched into my soul like the rings of a tree. But those scars didn't define me. They were a testament to my strength, my resilience, my ability to rise from the ashes. "What are you thinking about, Mina?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle. I smiled and took his hand. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," I said. "I've been through hell, but I've come out the other side. And I've found a love and a purpose that I never thought possible." He squeezed my hand. "You deserve it all, Mina. You're an extraordinary woman." I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over me. The fear was gone. The anger was gone. All that remained was love, gratitude, and the unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. My legacy won't be measured in money or possessions, but in the lives I've touched, the hope I've inspired, the love I've shared. I want to be remembered not as a victim, but as a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of light in a world that often feels dark. I want my story to be a reminder that even when you're standing at the cliff's edge, with the wind howling in your ears and the darkness closing in, there is always hope. There is always a way back. There is always a reason to keep fighting. And most importantly, there is always love. Love that can heal, love that can empower, love that can transform the darkest of nights into the brightest of dawns. Love that can help you find your way back from the cliff's edge and into the sunlight. Years have passed since Mina, my mother, slipped away peacefully in her sleep, Daniel holding her hand, her face serene. The grief was profound, a deep ache that settled in the bones. But even in the midst of sorrow, there was a sense of peace. She had lived a full life, a life of love, resilience, and unwavering dedication to others. Now, I, Jacob, stand on the porch of the old farmhouse, the same porch where she shared that moment of reflection with Daniel so many years ago. My wife, Sarah, stands beside me, her hand resting gently on my arm. Our children, Lily and Ethan, run through the fields, their laughter echoing in the warm summer air. They are teenagers now, full of life and energy, carrying within them the spirit of their grandmother. We visit this place often, this sanctuary that held so much meaning for her. It's where she found solace, where she reconnected with her parents, where she discovered her purpose. We come here to remember her, to feel her presence, to draw strength from her enduring spirit. Lily, who inherited Mina's artistic talent, is sketching in her notebook, capturing the beauty of the landscape with her deft hand. Ethan, who shares her passion for helping others, is volunteering at a local soup kitchen, inspired by her example of compassion and service. She would have loved seeing them like this, Sarah says, her voice soft. I nod, a lump forming in my throat. She would have been so proud. We often share stories about Mina with Lily and Ethan, tales of her strength, her courage, her unwavering belief in the power of love. We tell them about the challenges she faced, the obstacles she overcame, the light she brought into the world. We want them to know her, not just as their grandmother, but as a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Later that evening, as the sun begins to set, we gather around a bonfire, sharing stories and memories. Lily pulls out her guitar and begins to play a song that Mina loved, a melody that fills the air with a sense of peace and tranquility. As I look at my children, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, I realize that Mina's legacy lives on, not just in our memories, but in the way we live our lives, in the values we embrace, in the love we share. Her light continues to shine, illuminating the path for generations to come. And I know with unwavering certainty that even though she is no longer physically with us, her spirit will endure, forever etched in our hearts, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, hope can always prevail. The cliff's edge might come, but so long as we remember her, we have the strength to turn away and find the sunlight once more. That is her greatest gift, and it is ours to pass on.